When you first open this program by going to the web address, it's going to open in your browser, and it's going to present you with some options. If it brings up any pop-ups that suggest that you buy the Pro version, just close out of those. And from the landing page, you just want to click New Design. Okay? Don't worry about any of the other options or any of the width and height things, just New Design, leave it empty, create. All right? And this brings us into the main window of Gravit. From here, you can go into the File menu, and you can open a local file. So if you downloaded the creativity test, which is just a kind of an image, a JPEG file, to your computer, you should be able to open it from the local file, depending on where you saved it. So you can see here's mine. I went and downloaded my creativity test, and it's a JPEG file that's in my downloads. So yours might be in a different place depending on where your computer downloads to, so always check that when you're kind of saving things. But now I have my creativity test. I'm going to open that. And you can see it brings in this image on the screen. So over on the left, you'll see a palette called Layers. And layers will show basically a list of everything you create in this program. Right now there's only one thing in this list, and that is the image that we've brought in. If you hover over this listing of the image, you will see that there's two little icons. One is a lock layer button. The other is a toggle visibility. So the little eyeball that toggles visibility, that just turns the layer on and off so you can see it or not see it. That can be useful if you want to look at something underneath another object, if it's gotten lost, that kind of thing. For now, we'll leave that on. But we are going to take a look at this lock layer function. And what that does is if you press it, it will lock the layer so you can no longer kind of accidentally drag it or move it or edit it in any way. And this is useful because we're going to be drawing on top of this image, so we don't want to allow it to move around while we're doing that. However, before I lock it, so I'm going to unlock it for a second, we're going to change one thing about this image. So I'm going to click on it. That's going to select it. And when it's selected, you will see some options over on the right. The one I'm going to look for is called opacity. That basically means the overall transparency of the layer. Right now it's set to 100. I'm going to drag that down to about 50%. You can type it here, or you can just drag the little slider. What that will do is it will basically gray out the image, making it partially transparent. And the reason I want that is I'm going to be drawing on top of this, and it's a little easier for me to see what I've done if the bottom image is different. And I'll move this back to 100% at the end, but for now this just makes the background a little different and easier to see what I'm doing. So I'm going to leave that, and then I'm going to lock the layer. Now, before we go any further, I want you to save your work. And hopefully you will never encounter anything in this course where you lose work that you've worked hard on, but getting into the habit of saving often is key. Now, from Gravit, because it's a web-based program, you really want to make sure you know where it's saving to. Under the File menu, you're going to look for Save to Local File. I would just ignore the cloud stuff. It's probably not going to be useful to you and might just be more confusing, especially if you're not using their Pro version. So we want just the Save to Local File. The first time you save, you should always use this Save To function. Once you've saved a project at least once, you can just use the kind of normal save or even the shortcut Control S, and that will just kind of copy back over top of your existing file save. But for now, save to. And I would highly recommend that you make a folder for this class. That way you don't have to always constantly hunt, where did this file go? Put it in one place, a place that you know how to access easily, and you can make a new folder for it to go in, okay? The other thing I would encourage you to do is give your files clear names. Don't call them a bunch of random letters. how will you ever know what that is later when you're trying to hunt for it? Okay, so give it a descriptive name that you'll be able to recognize. So creativity test is another easy one. You can call it whatever you want as long as you can remember later what you've called it. Okay, and it's going to automatically save as a Gravit file, which is this .gv design. Just leave that, don't touch that, that's fine. Okay, then click save. Okay, and if you've already saved, it will just prompt you to replace it, which I have, so I'm just going to accept that. Now let's start drawing. So the challenge for this creativity test is to take the boxes and the kind of line that is in there initially and expand it. Draw your own thing on top of it. You can do whatever you want. And the openness of this creativity test is the trick, okay? So I'm not going to tell you what to draw in these boxes, and the things I'm going to show I would encourage you not to copy, because this is all about your own creativity and what occurs to you when you kind of look at these shapes. But I'm going to walk you through some of the basic tools that you can use. You can use anything you want for any of the boxes. You can choose to use color. You can choose to use just black and white. It is totally up to you. Okay, so the first little option is there's these shapes. Okay, so most of your tools are right up here in this area. You'll see kind of a selector, a pointer tool, and then you'll see some shapes, and then you'll see the pen tool, as well as some cutting tools and that kind of thing. So if you want an easy one to start with, you can try the shape tools. There's lines, rectangles, ellipses, polygons, triangles, and a star. Okay, and I'll walk you through each one. So line lets you draw a simple line. All right, so you click and drag to draw it. It will draw just a normal straight line. And by default, it will be a fairly thin line. It will be just kind of like 1 point in width. So you can see if I click off of it, it's a fairly thin line. Using this pointer tool, I can reselect objects that I've already drawn. And this is useful if you want to change some properties about them. So over on the right, where there's this inspector, these are the properties you can change, but you have to be selected on the object to change them. Okay, so always remember you have to be selected on the object. And then over on the right, I'm going to look down here where it says borders. And this is kind of the outline of the object. For a line, the border is essentially the thickness of that line. Right now it's set to 1. I'm going to bump that up. I'm going to make it a much thicker line, because the lines in the background are very thick, so I might as well make it nice and thick to go with it. Okay, you can also change the color. So that numerical value is the width, but the little circle here is the color. And if you click on that little circle, it will bring up a little color picker. And you can either kind of click on some basic colors at the bottom, or you can click on any to start with, shuffle through this kind of spectrum of colors, and then the little dot that shows up here, that's the actual color that you're picking. So you drag that dot around to choose like a darker color or a lighter color. The color that appears in this little box, that is the one you have chosen. That is the one that will be applied to your line. So again, totally up to you what colors you want to use in this. You can have fun, use a rainbow of colors, or you can stick to something fairly limited, your choice. Okay, I'm just going to leave mine at black for now. So that's the line tool, straight lines. Now you can also draw rectangles. So if you want to draw a rectangle, you basically just drag it to the size that you want. Once you've created this box, you'll notice there's some handles on it. This little white dot that's sticking out, that's your rotation handle. So you can drag that in order to rotate the box. And the nice thing about these types of vector programs is that nothing you create is set in stone. So if you change your mind later, you just have to select the object and move it. You'll also notice these corner handles, and this will let you kind of resize your box as well. And this is going to be different depending on the type of shape, but you will see it's pretty easy to just kind of change the size of your rectangle, readjust it as you go. By default, it's just kind of this gray color, but you can pop over into your properties, your inspector over here, and you can click this to change the color to whatever you want. Now, right now it doesn't have a border. You'll notice it's just kind of goes red right to the edge. If you would like to give it a border, so an outline, all you do is you go down to borders here, you click the little plus sign, and that will add a border, meaning you can then change that number to give it an outline. You can change the outline to any color you want. All right. Ooh, That's bright. All right. So that's kind of the rectangle. And then ellipse is similar. Ellipse is a circle. All right, so you can click and drag to draw a circle. And you will see kind of as you draw, there might be these little kind of teal lines that appear. Those are just to kind of help you line things up. So use them or don't use them, but they're there to kind of make things even. And again, with the ellipse tool, you can give it any kind of color you want. And you can give it a border if you want or not. Polygon. So a polygon by default will create kind of like a hexagon shape, but you can change that. So over in your inspector, you'll see this value called points. Right now it's set to 6 points. If you drag it, you will change the number of sides on your polygon. So if you drag it down to 3, for instance, you'll actually create a triangle. If you put it at 4, you're going to get a square, and so on and so forth. So this kind of gives you all sorts of options, but it's all going to be some sort of poly shape. And again, works the same way as the rectangle and the ellipse. You can give it whatever color you want, and you can give it a border if you desire as well. Then there's the triangle, which works, again, pretty similarly to all the others. Drag to draw, give it a color, now you got a triangle. And lastly, there's the star. And the star, again, is just a drag and drop shape. Give it a color, but it has some additional options. So if you don't want the typical 5-point star, you can change the number of points on your star and make it more of a burst shape or anything like that. I should also mention you can change things like opacity, like we already kind of learned. So if you want to make some of your shapes transparent, it's as easy as dragging on that opacity slider. And if you want to change the corners, so let me show you on a rectangle, for instance. If you change the corner value here, it will actually make it a rounded rectangle. And it will taper these off. Not all shapes will let you do this, but any with kind of points will. So for example, the poly shape, I can change the corners on those, and you'll see it's kind of rounding that shape and making it less pointy. Okay? So shapes are a great easy tool just to get some basic things on the page, but you can certainly go further than this. So I'm going to show you the lines. I'm just going to delete these so we have a little more space. And I'm going to show you the pen tool. So if you want to draw like your own customized lines that aren't just kind of a simple direct line, this is probably your best bet. And it might take a little while to get used to this tool, but it's very powerful. It can draw pretty much anything once you do get a handle on it. The simplest way to use this tool is just to click. And when you click, you make a point. And then I'm not holding down my mouse while I'm doing this, I'm just moving my mouse. You can drag it somewhere else, and then you can click again to make another point. And it will automatically connect those 2 points that you make. So the main thing to not do here is don't drag unless you know what dragging means, because dragging creates a different type of point, which is a curve. Okay, so if you're not ready to learn those curves yet, just kind of click, click, move, click, move, click, move, click, and it will create basically a long connected line. And if you go all the way back to your original point, it will connect everything into a shape, which you can then color. All right, so very useful. Now, to do those curve lines, like I kind of showed you, it's the same kind of principle, but instead of clicking once, you're clicking and dragging. And as you drag, you'll create these handles, and these handles are not part of the line. You shouldn't try to click on top of them or anything like that. Instead, they simply define how curvy the line is at that point. You want your points on a curved line to be fairly far away from each other. If you put the points too close to each other and drag your handles out really big, you're going to get a really tangled mess of lines because they're not going to be smoothly going from one to the other. Instead, you want to make sure those points are nicely spaced out and only drag the handles out as much as you need to define the curve that you want. So you don't want them huge, you just want them kind of small, and you want them to point in the right direction, because if they're like that, you can see it changes the direction of the curve. Generally, you want the handles to kind of follow the direction that you want the curve to go. All right, so if you get good at this, you could draw spirals or SE shapes or basically anything. And it's worth playing around with this tool and getting used to it because it will be kind of one of our primary drawing tools that we'll use. And we'll do a lot of work with it, so it's important. All right, and you can see that these kind of wacky shapes that you draw, you can fill as long as you connect it back to that initial point. So if you want these kind of custom shapes to have color inside them, that's what you need to do. You need to connect them back to the beginning. All right, so there's some other versions of this. There's also a freehand tool where you can just kind of draw, and this is just a dragging kind of shape. Feel free to use this if you find the pen tool hard at first and you just kind of want to scribble. That's okay. But I would also caution that when you do the freehand, it creates like a whole bunch of extra points, and you'll probably end up with a line that's a lot kind of jagged, okay? And if you're not used to kind of using the mouse, I even find it's a bit laggy as well because this is a web-based program. So I don't find you can really get nice smooth lines this way, but it is an option if you find the pen tool frustrating, okay? So that's kind of a more scribble thing, but it will make your lines pretty rough. Okay, so I would recommend one or the other, but if you can get used to pen tool, do it. You'll have better results. Okay, and the last thing I'll show you is that you can also cut apart shapes. So if I make like a simple rectangle or something, while I have that rectangle selected, I can go up here and I can grab the knife tool. And what this will let you do is basically start a cut from outside the shape, so place your cursor somewhere outside of the rectangle, and then drag a line across it. And what that will do is it will actually chop the shape in two. You're not going to notice though until you break it apart. So you got to click the kind of pointer tool, deselect it, and then you should be able to kind of grab back on the pieces and separate and move them. Now you can also adjust these shapes more individually. The pointer that is the default, the black one, basically lets you pick up shapes, move them, rotate them, do that kind of thing. But there's another one underneath this that is called the sub-select. It's like the white arrow. And this lets you target individual points. You can click on those little nodes at the kind of the ends of the shapes, and you can then adjust them, move them. So again, the nice thing about vector programs is that you can edit them. Nothing is set in stone. You can constantly go back and change your mind, change the forms, move points, add points, that kind of thing. So this works on lines too. You can drag points and readjust them. So that's the white arrow. And again, the black one lets you pick up, the white arrow lets you move individual points. And a few other things you might find useful. Up here in the toolbar, there's some flips. So if you want to create a shape but then kind of flip it, there's some easy buttons that will just do that. As well, they'll let you rotate objects by a certain amount of degrees, so an easy way to rotate 90 degrees to the left or to the right. Another thing you can do is you can change the order of your objects in the layers. So as I mentioned previously, everything you draw in Gravit will show up as a listing in your layers palette. And if you're ever having trouble like finding something or selecting it, you can click on it in the layers, and that is another way to select your object. And if you have two overlapping shapes, and let's say you want to change them so that the red one is on top of the green one here, what you do is you select the one you want to change, and then up here where it says bring element forward or send element backwards, that will let you change the order. So if I click bring element forward, that will bring my red shape on top of my green shape. However, you can also kind of drag and drop in your layers palette itself. So right now this path is my red shape. If I drag that downwards in my layers, it's going to bring it down below the green shape. So you can either use these buttons or you can just drag things in the layers palette. I'll also mention that you're probably going to get into a situation where, let's say you decide you want to fill one part of your design. So here, a common occurrence. Let's say you want to create part of your square here as one color and the other part as another. At this point, I'll show you some other tricks later on, but at this point, you're probably best to do those things as complete shapes. So if you create a line, and let's say you want to take that line and you want to create a fill in it, you've got to make that into a full shape. So you want to extend that. So take your pen tool, click on the last point, and then create a line that overlaps the edge of this kind of grid and connects everything in that section to an entire shape. Okay? And then you can give it a fill. So if I wanted to create something like stripes or something like that, I'm creating like overlapping shapes that essentially start at one edge, continue another one, and connect back to each other so that you create this sense of overlapping. All right. So at this point, this is kind of the best way to kind of do kind of background elements as well. You want to create shapes and kind of send them behind other things. I'll also mention that in terms of the canvas as a whole, there's a couple things to note, which is one is you can zoom in. The zoom tool is up here. You can zoom in and out. So if you're having trouble kind of moving something or seeing exactly how something is placed on a page, or just need more accuracy, definitely zoom in. And then when you're zoomed in, you can use this little hand tool, the pan, to pick up the kind of canvas and move it around. A lot easier to kind of direct yourself by just kind of clicking and dragging. And then if you want to zoom out, you can certainly use the minus sign. But if you're way zoomed in, or if you've panned like somewhere weird and you can't find your canvas anymore, if you click fit all, it will just revert the canvas to kind of the default and pull out in one click. Okay, so definitely make use of the zoom where you can. It will help you be more accurate, especially as we get to our more detailed drawings that we do later. So that's all I'll show you at the moment. I don't want to overwhelm you too much with tools, but the idea is to play, experiment, and really let your creativity lead you in unexpected directions. When you feel you're done, you've completed your entire creativity test, there's something in all the boxes, then you can do a final save and export. Okay, so in the file menu, you always want to make sure your current save is updated. So you want to do the kind of save command to make sure that is accurate. And then you will also have to export your file, because the Gravit format is only, you can only open that in Gravit itself. So in order for me to see your work from where you upload to like D2L, you're going to have to export it. So to do that, you're going to go File, you're going to go Export, and you're going to choose the file type PNG. Now, pretty much anything in this list will work, but I would recommend PNG for vector graphics because it's kind of designed to work with kind of flat colors and kind of precision line work, whereas JPEG is better for photos, which we will do later when we use Photopea, which is our Photoshop replacement. So for anything we do in Gravit, choose PNG, okay? And that's going to prompt you to save it again. Again, make sure you're in kind of a folder that you've created so it's all together. And make sure you give it a file name that is descriptive. All right, so that will create a PNG file, and that's the file that I want you to upload to D2L. So don't give me the Gravit file because I won't be able to open it there. Make sure you give me a PNG file. So you'll only have to do that at the very end of any project when you're about to turn it in to me. Okay, make sure you check that. Make sure you check the file names and the types so that I'm getting the right file. I can open it. I can give you a mark. Okay. For this particular project, we will not be marking them traditionally. We're going to mark them in a different way on a call. So just have it kind of ready so I can see them in D2L. But ultimately, we're going to be looking at them together when we do a Google Meet. All right. So that's it for now. Feel free to scrub back through this video to replay any parts that you might find useful.